In the heart of Yemen, the ancient city of Shibam once echoed with the name of a legendary figure, Qasim bin Ibrahim, famously known as Abu al-Tujar, the father of merchants. His fame and fortune were unrivaled, and his story is woven into the very fabric of this city's history. His life was full of success, but one day was very special for him. That day, he was going to send his son on a trade journey for the first time. Early in the morning, he made his son Abdullah sit in front of him, gave him 100 dinars and said, "Son, today is the start of your journey. These are not just 100 dinars. This is the first test of your life. Spend it wisely and always remain honest." His son, who was eager to see the world, happily took the 100 dinars and headed towards the market. For the first time, he became part of such a big crowd. Everywhere he looked, there were people and shops. Shopkeepers were praising their goods, and the large number of buyers made him very excited. As he moved further into the market, Abdullah saw a strange scene that stopped him in his tracks. At a crossroads, some people had hung a dead body and were beating it with sticks. Seeing this, Abdullah was shocked. He quickly approached them and asked, "Why are you treating a dead man like this?" He shouted angrily. An old man turned to Abdullah and explained, "This man was our debtor. He died before repaying the 100 dinars he owed us. He has no family left, so we are doing this in hopes that people passing by might feel pity and give some money until his debt is paid. After that, we will bury him." Hearing this, Abdullah felt pity in his heart. He immediately said, "If it's only 100 dinars, then take my 100 dinars and let this poor soul rest in peace." All the people looked at Abdullah in amazement. They immediately took down the body and buried it. With a strange sense of peace in his heart, Abdullah returned home. When he arrived, he told his father the whole story. His father took a deep breath for a moment and then, smiling, handed Abdullah another 100 dinars. This time, Abdullah bought some goods from the market and set off on a journey with a caravan. As he left the city with the caravan, he started to wonder, "If I face trouble during this journey, will the caravan members stand by me or leave me behind?" So he approached one of the caravan members and asked, "Brother, could you lend me a water jug so I can fill it from a nearby pond?" The caravan member immediately gave him a jug. Abdullah, using the excuse of filling water, sat under a tree and carefully watched whether the caravan would wait for him or not. After some time, he saw the caravan moving ahead without any concern for him, disappearing from his sight. The merchant's son, feeling sad, thought to himself, "It's just as I thought. If I ever fall behind or face any accident, these people will never remember me." The thought that no one would search for him if he were lost made him feel hopeless, so he returned to the city. A few days later, he decided to try his luck again, thinking maybe the next caravan would be better. He packed his belongings again and set off with a new caravan. But soon, the same thing happened. The caravan moved forward without waiting for him, leaving him alone once more. The third time, he joined a new caravan and, as usual, stayed behind. This time, however, his companions noticed his absence immediately. Realizing he was missing, they stopped, grew worried, and returned to search for him. When they found him and brought him back, the merchant's son felt a deep sense of peace in his heart. He thought, "These people are my true companions, and I can trust them completely." The caravan continued on its journey until evening, when they reached a deserted place and decided to camp for the night. As they were preparing food, a young man appeared from the vast desert. His face showed signs of bravery. He came straight to the merchant's son and confidently sat down beside him. The young man said, "I am a traveler. May I join this caravan for a few days?" Abdullah nodded in agreement. The young man continued, "If you are truly a merchant, you may need a servant." The merchant's son looked at him with surprise and replied, "Yes, indeed. If you wish, you can be my servant. But what can you do?" The caravan members had already decided that each night, one person would take turns guarding the caravan so that everyone else could rest. The young man confidently said, "Give me the duty of guarding every night. I will stay on watch and promise to bring the caravan safely to its destination. But I have one condition. Whatever I do, do not question me nor interfere in my work." The merchant's son and the other caravan members looked at each other in amazement. but the young man's confidence and strong tone convinced them. They agreed to his condition, and thus the young man joined the caravan. They resumed their journey with a new sense of determination. Every night when the caravan stopped to rest, the young man would silently stand guard, and under his protection, everyone slept peacefully. Several times he saved the caravan members from wild animals, risking himself. Yet the merchant's son still wondered who this young man was and why he had made such a strange promise. One night, their caravan stopped near the jungle. Abdullah's young servant was on guard duty when he noticed a distant light. It was a fire burning around a tent. The young servant understood that there might be danger nearby, and so he prepared himself for action. Instead of waking up the rest of the caravan, the young servant quietly moved away and, hiding behind the bushes, began approaching the light. When he reached the fire, he saw a group of bandits sitting around planning a major robbery. Rather than acting hastily, he decided to listen carefully to their conversation. He noticed the leader of the bandits talking, saying they would attack the caravan the next day and rob it. Once he was sure they posed a threat to the caravan, he devised a plan in his mind. Without hesitation, he boldly stepped forward and stood near them. One of the bandits, surprised, asked, "Who are you and what are you doing here?" The young servant replied fearlessly, "I'm a thief too and want to join your group." The bandits looked at him with anger for a moment, then suddenly laughed and said, "All right, if you're really a thief, join us in the looting. Come, be one of us." Seizing the moment, the young servant suggested, "There's no benefit in robbing this poor caravan. Let's go for something bigger." Excited, the bandits asked, "What place are you talking about?" With a smile, he replied, "Why don't we rob the king's treasure? I have the skill to scale any wall in no time." Hearing this, the bandits were thrilled and agreed to his plan, setting off toward the city. Under the cover of night, they reached the king's palace. The palace walls were tall and strong, but the young man climbed them with ease like a trickster and threw down a rope for the others. As each bandit climbed up, he quietly took them down one by one. The bandits waiting below had no idea what was happening above. One by one, each bandit climbed up, only to meet the same fate. Finally, the leader of the bandits climbed up, and the young servant killed him too. He then gathered all the bodies and placed them in the treasure room, working quietly and seriously, as if he were guarding a secret. As he did this, he noticed a deadly snake sitting on the king's throne. Without delay, he drew his sword and killed the snake in one strike. After successfully protecting the treasure, he climbed back down the wall and made his way toward the king's chamber. When he entered, he saw the king in a deep sleep. He carefully rearranged some items in the room and made a small mark on the king's leg to prove he had been there. Then, he quickly exited the palace. With all tasks completed, he quietly returned to the caravan and found that everyone was still asleep. Meanwhile, when the king woke up, he realized someone had entered his room. He immediately called his minister too. The king called his minister and said, "I suspect someone entered my room last night because the things in my room are scattered." The minister replied, "Your Majesty, I have important news as well. In the treasure room there are several bodies that look like thieves, and on the throne there's a dead snake." The king said, "These are strange events, but make sure no one hears about the details." The next day, the king announced in the city that whoever could tell him what happened last night in the palace would be given a great reward. Many people came forward, sharing different stories, but none satisfied the king. Days passed, yet no one could reveal the truth. Eventually, the king consulted his minister, who suggested there might be a caravan nearby whose members could know something. When the king's messengers reached the caravan, everyone claimed to know nothing about the incident. At that moment, the young servant of Abdullah stepped forward and said, "My master knows everything about this." Abdullah was shocked and looked at his servant with anger, but the servant whispered, "Don't forget your promise. Agree with what I say and ask no questions." The king's messengers requested Abdullah's son to come to the court, but he hesitated. Then his servant said, "Master, we should obey the king." Hearing this, Abdullah agreed and went to the king's court with his servant. When they arrived, the king immediately asked, "Tell me, what did you see last night?" The young servant replied, "Your Majesty, I didn't see anything, but my master here was present and told me everything in detail." The king urged him, "Quickly, tell me what happened that night." The young servant recounted the entire story, adding that he had marked the king's leg. When the king checked, the mark was there and he became convinced of their truthfulness. The king praised him. "You killed the snake and the bandits, thus saving my life and protecting my treasure. Ask for any reward you desire." Humbly, the young servant replied, "Your Majesty, my master deserves the reward, not me." Then the king rewarded Abdullah with a chest full of gold and jewels. As they returned from the palace, Abdullah was overwhelmed and wondered, "Who is this young servant who protected me at every step and has now made me a wealthy man? Where did he come from, and why has he helped me all this time?" Finally, Abdullah asked him, "Why did you lie? I knew nothing. Who are you, and why have you been helping me?" The servant smiled and said, "You don't know me, but I know you. A while ago you paid off a debt. Today I returned that favor. But now my time is up, and I must go back." Saying this, he vanished as quickly as he had first appeared, disappearing from Abdullah's sight. Abdullah was left in awe, and this encounter changed his life forever. He never discovered who the servant truly was, whether he was a ghost, a human, or an angel sent by God. Whatever the truth, Abdullah understood that pure kindness is never wasted, and good deeds always return in some form.